Okay, let me have your attention. Let's talk a little bit about logistics.
Charles, I'm sorry. The assistant instructor took it off. This is your retired, network required surprise retirement party. You don't get to be in charge. I know it's going to be a little stressful for you. But to alleviate, and we're going to have to move everybody. Charles is going to sit here where you guys can all face him, or we can move him up there and vice versa.
Boy, I think he had to look into the sun.
Well, I've always said
All right,
Why
you're
we do this way? That
good.
way nobody's looking at the sun.
Well, I got some stuff out.
Well, we know, but you're not in charge. So. Everybody that way.
Why don't we put them this way? Everybody this way.
Which one? Whichever.
That way nobody's in the sun.
And so we decided to give him a roast. But last weekend it occurred to me that it was going to be a little stressful for Charles not to have the class meeting. So I thought about it and I thought, well, you know, I could condense that 2 hours into about 15-minute presentation. So who better to help me get to the point quickly than Monty Mayor? So here we go. Here's our class meeting for tonight.
Yep.
Charles wants to say that everyone had a good work ethic.
Thanks.
Oh, and to make it more personalized, you're going to have to do a little work on your work yourself. Charles thought that, insert your name here, has made the most improvement over the past time period. Charles really appreciates the assistant instructors, just not enough to actually pay us.
Wait a minute. Oh yeah. Thanks for that too.
Take your seat for
Video time. We're done with the discussion part. Video time.
All right, that's it.
Insert your name. Needed one more cross Oh no! A swim!
Yeah.
Rewind! Slow-mo!
camera goes off.
Oh, did I turn it off? Alan, how do you work this thing? Does anybody have a light?
Where's the remote?
Where's the remote? Okay, based on this swim, you can see how important it is that you insert maneuver, stroke, lean here. Now, for the last part, we know that some of you have a test coming up, and the assistant instructors took another vote, and frankly, we don't give a damn. If you heard us scream something at you more than twice going down the river, you probably ought to study that because you clearly ain't doing it right. Tomorrow morning, we will be breaking camp. Charles likes you to break camp at 9 o'clock. If those of you who've been around for a while should know this. Get off your lazy butts and clean that tent up tonight so that we do not have to wait on you tomorrow because it's his last semester and he'd hate to leave you, but he probably will. And he needs camping fees tonight. Look, see, I've got it down. He needs your camping fees tonight. $5 per person per night. You can pay him during the break. We will be having a break. And we have some cake during the break, and we're going to have a video at the end of the evening, not the class video for today, so too bad, so sad, you don't get to see yourselves, and, or you might. And that's it for the abbreviated class meeting!
Those of the female persuasion that think they need extra study time on the test, Ronnie has volunteered to personally tutor you. Just meet him in his tent after the meeting.
Thank you, honey, I forgot that.
He
It
doesn't
doesn't
care.
matter, Ronnie, really.
Way.
As long as you do what he tells you to do, he's good. All right, Curtis, you're our first speaker up.
Now, we all know that Charles has taught for many years, and he's taught all of us a lot of life lessons, whether he knows it or not. Things that our parents may have tried to teach us, but Charles gave it to us in a better way. Let's think about this. Charles has taught us encouragement. He always has these phrases. He tells them to everyone to give us encouragement. Phrases such as, you have the skills to do this. It's just whether your feeble mind can take the pressure. And when we're really at our worst out there, he gives us that reassurance with like, I'm scared for you. But he has his own flair of giving you that knowledge. And you know, if you ever listen to him, he uses these similes and these metaphors and analogies. You know, these similes like, those rocks over there, they're slippery. You walk on them, it's like a hog on ice. Or analogies like he used last night. Well, every once in a while, a blind hog does find an acorn. So he has his own way of imparting knowledge to us. But he does have his way of, you know, getting across to us, even if he has to repeat it by saying things like rewind or slow-mo. He does have his way to get it to us. And he has all taught us how to critically think about our paddling. For those of you who have ever sat in the eddy while Alan's filming, you've all heard this. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Watch this. And for that real critical maneuver that you should be learning, there's that all-important statement that comes behind watch this that says, shouldn't have done that. But he's not one to just, you know, stay on the critical and give you a hard time. He is going to compliment you when it's deserved. He does do a good job on compliments. Right, Alan? Yeah. He does. Alan, this is the best cobbler ever. But he has, you know, kept us down to earth, helped us remember the most important things in life. Every time when we get on the river, he always asks, okay, make sure you know who has your lunch. Yeah. But at a time like this, sincerely on this, Charles has taken a lot of us into the wilderness and showed us a lot of friendship from it. He's imparted us with the wisdom of not only paddling but other things in life. And it always brings me back to a little saying that I learned a long time ago. It's the Wilderness Code. It says, for this trail we've been on here, Charles, the Wilderness Code goes on like this. It goes, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, and kill nothing but time. Thanks for killing the time with us, Charles. We appreciate it.
Back in my early days of running the Ocoee with Charles, I was convinced, and rightly so, that my survival depended upon staying right behind him and imitating his every move. If he angled his bow to the right, I angled my bow to the right. If he let slip an involuntary expletive and hit a low brace, so did I. Like the USAF Thunderbirds team that followed their leader right into the ground, I was totally committed to keeping station on Charles's stern. Once, at the top of Broken Nose Rapid, I got a little overzealous and bashed into his tail, slewing him way off course and causing me to, yes, pass him. I don't know what happened after that because my stress level suddenly got so high that my mental software crashed. No matter how careful we might be, occasionally we all collide with chaos theory. My single-minded and desperate determination to keep Charles in sight was, apparently, so comical that my fellow peddlers presented me with a pair of therapeutic safety glasses that had stereoscopic pictures of Charles glued on the back. In case Charles got around a bend and out of sight, I could quickly don my safety glasses and hopefully postpone the onset of hysterical psychosis. For over 20 years now, following Charles has been both a survival tactic and a privilege. The canoe class has defined a wonderful era in my life, They're sometimes glorious and oftentimes humiliating and humbling. And it's provided me with a convenient and almost believable excuse for avoiding steady employment. It's been my great good fortune to be a member of that collection of, shall we say, exceptional individuals that constitute the Assistant Instructor Corps. Many of you have heard the story of the student who asked Charles how she could become an assistant instructor. Well, he told her, first, somebody has to die. And that is a pretty good indication of the loyalty and love that we all have for Charles. Charles has led a lot of us over the horizon of our perceived or self-imposed limitations, freeing us to explore the unmapped territory beyond. And not only in the realm of canoeing. As you can see before you, he has propelled me into public speaking, an accomplishment which makes parting the Red Sea look like a parlor trick. It occurs to me that we also owe Jimmy Sue a debt of gratitude for the sacrifices that she has made in the service of this great adventure. Unlike my friend Ivan's wife, who's always glad to see him fly away for the weekend, I suspect that Jimmy Sue might actually miss Charles. So if you would join me, let's give her a well-deserved. Very few of the multitude who have passed through the canoe class have any inkling of the size and extent of the burden that Charles has borne in conducting this class. The endless decisions and unending worry. Those of us who do understand what it entails will all agree that he has earned the right to follow the snowbirds to the valley and to string Chinese lanterns around the RV. We have also agreed not to tell them how gay those lanterns So, on behalf of all of us who have learned from his teaching, benefited from his counsel, and been blessed by his friendship, I extend this wish. May the RV never encounter severe crosswinds, and a dump station always be handy when the holding tanks are full. Godspeed.
That is a tough act to follow. I don't really think I came here to do a roast, but what I thought I'd talk about is share. Okay. This way it is. Okay, good. Be useful too. At the same time, but I thought I'd try to share some stories that I've heard over the years that I still chuckle about when I think about them, and it kind of focuses on one of Charles's teaching characteristics, which is communication. So I'm talking about Charles' communications. And the first story would be when I was a beginning student, I was a tandem paddler, and we went to the Saline River in Arkansas. And to set the stage, anybody who's paddled the Saline remembers well what the river smells like. It's a very one you can't forget. And back in the old days, they had not improved everything, so you didn't have the hot water, flush toilets, and even showers that you do today. It was pit toilet. What we had, and it didn't smell very good, so that's setting the stage. So I remember my first communication problem with Charles was after a hard day paddling, I was leaving the pit toilet as he was coming in, and I didn't realize he had walked by one of the campgrounds where one of our students was baking gingerbread. So I'm walking out, Charles is walking in, he gives me a big smile and says, "Hey, do you smell that gingerbread?" And I said, "No, it smells like an outhouse to me." So we were not on the same page. That's a true story. Anyway, later I became a solo paddler and had another communication gaffe with Charles. He'd got me out on the Saline River, out at the Swim Beach Rapids, and encouraged me to get out and do my first side surf on a wave. As he sat a few feet away in an eddy behind a big rock. So I plunged the boat in, and I'm out there, and I didn't know all the things to do. I was on a high brace. I didn't realize you're supposed to use your knee to try to keep the boat up. So I'm hanging on a high brace. Charles is watching me with a very straight face, and pretty soon the boat starts to go over, the river fingers are pulling on it, and I'm hanging on this high brace, but it didn't do any good because the boat's going. So I'm kind of watching Charles. He's got a big smile on his face, and I'm watching him kind of go clockwise. And I'm going kind of, until I'm under the water. So when we got back to camp later, I said, Charles, you were smiling when I was going over. I just wondered what that meant, and that's the line Curtis used. Charles says, I was just thinking, shouldn't have done that. But third, I eventually became one of the assistants, and I remember there was a less than successful attempt by Charles to improve communication with the students. This is before identity theft was in fashion, and so Charles gave out all the assistants' phone numbers to the students so that if the student wasn't comfortable talking with him about a problem, he could call one of us and maybe they'd feel better talking with us. And sure enough, I got a phone call from a young female student who puts her mom on the phone. So mom wants to be assured by me that her young daughter was going to have her virtue and modesty protected during the class trip. Puts me on the spot. So regarding the virtue, I already knew that she was going to be sleeping in a tent with her boyfriend, so I was able to cheerfully assure her that her daughter would be monitored closely throughout the trip. But then Mom pops the big question, and she says, how many toilet facilities are there going to be along the river so her daughter would be able to have some opportunities to go to the bathroom going down the river? So I crossed fingers and toes and eyes and answered that I had personal experience with all these rivers that we were going to be running, and I could assure her that there were ample opportunities up and down the river. So that communication kind of didn't work out. But this is an excellent communication that Charles did without saying a word to me, and I don't know if you even remember this, but I went back east with Charles, picked up my brand new red XL13, and we went on the Nantahala River route. Bob Taylor picked up his boat at the same time. And going down the Nantahala about a mile before or so before the Nantahala Falls, I'm paddling on river left, and I see a little horizon line coming up, and just like Charles says, I hit the eddy. And so I'm sitting in the eddy, and I look over, and I thought, my reaction was, I'm going to die. I mean, there's a little drop, there's all these rocks, very unforgiving waves and everything just beyond that drop. And I was sitting there thinking, did I sign that organ donor card? I don't know. And Charles comes gliding into the eddy right in front of me, never said a word. I don't know if he knew what I was thinking about, but he just went out in an S ferry. Upstream ferry, went about halfway across the river, turned, went down, avoiding the you're going to die rapids. And so a light came on, and I said, I'll do that. So just like Charles, and I'm here today to talk about it. So I appreciate that. That was good communications. Didn't say a word. Later on the same trip, though, there was a communication that was between me too, Charles, that actually occurred. There was this rapid. I'm not sure I know the name. I think it was Broken Nose. But, everybody else seemed to follow Ronnie on a cheap route on river left, and I ran on river right. There's multiple drops, and your boat fills up with water, and people turn over and everything. And first drop, I filled up with water, and I pulled into the eddy, got out, dumped the boat, got back in, did the next drop, filled up with water. Same deal. After about the third time, there's only one drop left. So I came out, ran the drop, and Charles was waiting down there on the beach. And I pulled in, and he looked, and he said, anyway, he said, my God, I've never seen the boat come through with such little water in it. He was just bragging. So I had to say, well, should I tell him? So, what would you do? I told him anyway. I couldn't let him believe that. But the sixth and final that I'll mention, although there were so many other stories that come up that probably deal with communications, like the time they had packed the Preparation H with the little flashlight that Charles stuck in his mouth in the same package. And he couldn't communicate too well after that. But the last problem I'll say is at some point Charles stopped yelling at us, and that became kind of a source of anxiety because Ted Drake and I had become accustomed to receiving communications from Charles in the form of yelling at the top of his lungs when we were screwing up in a rapid somewhere. And there was a lot of sense of urgency that created, and also a sense of assurance that Charles knew exactly how we're screwing up and exactly what we needed to do to resolve the problem. And we started noticing, though, that over time, Charles yelled at us less and less, and Ted and I actually talked about this, and we were saying, maybe we'll just ask Charles to yell at us more. You know, he's not yelling at us, and we had some yell withdrawal anxiety. So, so anyway, I think. So anyway, I just concluded saying, you know, before you hang it up for the semester, Charles, would you please yell at us one more time?
Better get scared now.
Oh, God. Remember
Okay.
the shade.
I'm here. But is that working for you? Okay. Well, first of all, I have to thank you for the opportunity for letting me sleep with so many men. I think I slept with every man in the canoe club several times on several of your trips. I appreciate that. I want to thank you for saving my XL13 at the falls and giving it back to me at Nantahala. I'll never forget when you told me not to get in the hole, and I went straight for the hole, and you spent probably 45 minutes to an hour and finally got my boat back and said, I got a pretty good boat for you. You want this one? You also are responsible for my marriage, because I learned how to do a doofick, and that was the stroke that Eric married me on. After 11 years of dating, I did a doofick on the Guadalupe, and on the way home he said, I think it's time we get married. No, the doofick's responsible for that. It's a true story. But then you really saved my marriage at Big Laurel when Eric left me on the shuttle. I don't know how you got me in the van. I mean, I just remember you and Ronnie just talking up a blue streak. And I said, I'm not going. I'm not getting in the car. It's going to drive an hour and a half back here to get me. And somehow you got me in the car. So not only you're responsible for my marriage, you saved my marriage. I love the fact that we share our birthdays. But also, I love teaching outdoors, and you're really responsible for that, Charles. Your 3 rules of be safe, have fun, and learn something. I have probably 50,000 people have probably heard that from me in my 20 years of teaching, and I still use it, and it works for me every single time. So I love that part. But what I brought tonight is, it's typed, so that tells you how old it is. It's a poem that I wrote after we went up to the Nantahala for Thanksgiving. And it's so long that they would never publish it in the newsletter. So when Diana told me that they were going to do this, I thought, I'm bringing my poem and I'm reading it. So here we go.
God, I thought we killed that thing.
It's back. So here it goes. Texas turkeys gobble up whitewater on Thanksgiving. It's written by me, but it was produced by Eric Vanderbeck. Because I do the writing, but he helps me a lot. 'Twas the night before Thanksgiving when out on the road. Turkeys trotted from Texas in search of whitewater to boat. A drought had hold of Texas and Arkansas. Rivers ran dry. So these turkeys jumped in their vehicles and started to drive to the nearest whitewater where they could ply their sport. You see, this was required of them, a college-level canoe course. To North Carolina and the Nantahala River, our instructor, Charles Smith, and his students had been sequestered as a final attempt to apply the knowledge we had been learning about rivers and canoes all semester. Forced to drive 17 hours in holiday traffic through cold, rainy, inclement weather, we arrived at our destination determined to make the best of the situation by enjoying our holiday weekend together. All of our relatives had their doubts from the very beginning. Every institution they knew of was closed on Thanksgiving. But like turkeys to Thanksgiving tables, we boaters took to water. If one fool will go, all the others will follow. So it was true for us too on this Thanksgiving day. Not cold, rain, ice, floods, or a holiday would keep us from going out to play. With layers of wool, polypro, and rubber, we set out to prove to ourselves and each other that lessons well learned and practiced together might with luck keep us dry in this cold, 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 28-degree freezing fast river. As boats danced on water, the only thoughts in my head were that at the end of this river were hot showers, warm beds. For unlike any canoe trip I've ever taken, we were provided with truly first-class 4-star accommodations. For Charles had spared no expense on this our holiday vacation, 24-hour whitewater videos, laundry and maid service, all in the name of higher education. We dined on a somewhat traditional style Thanksgiving feast, thankful for so many things: wild rivers, clean runs, fun friends, good food, warm feet, and clean sheets. The second day for me was kind of a blur. Not quite as cold, smiling aggressive, but only one surf. However, for some there were remarkable moves, like James rolling the dagger solo. He really looked smooth. Although Diana, his partner, didn't fare that well, she ended up on Charles and Ann's dagger boat as a bow ornament for quite a long spell. John Simmons ran the follow, solo, upright, afloat, while Ted smiled at mountains like a happy old goat. For many on the second day, things started to click. A proud teacher watched students perfecting their tricks, knowing that having fun sure helps the learning to stick. On the eve of our last day, Commodore Jim Burton spoke candidly, advising us all, hammer yourselves, this is your last chance, go for the falls. Don't leave this river with any regrets. Your last shot's tomorrow, smile, be aggressive, give it your best. Lisa Burton, the purser, his C1 boating wife, said, remember, cold water helps keep the swelling down. Now that's good advice. With icicles hanging on this our last day, we smiled aggressively, surfed fanatically, and played. We hammered ourselves and we went for the falls with nary a spill. We had gone for it all. Yes, it was on that last day that we all started to glow, with the knowledge that comes when you really start to know that what has been taught and what has been learned is not always a test, but rather river spills can lead to river thrills that naturally require your best. We were singing our river songs loudly as we started to pack, storing river memories rapidly so that when we came back, the sound of a turkey's gobble on Thanksgiving Day will remind us of when we had to paddle a freezing, flooding river for a final exam grade. And of course, we all made it. And then I actually gave Nolan that award. So I think Nolan was paddled with us one day. And so we have the Nolanette Awards. Chris Smith had the most saves. And I had said, play harder, boat with a kayaker. And then Chris Carey was the Whitesell Wonder. Ann Davis and Wanda had a tie for most abused woman. Diana McCowan was second most abused woman. Lisa Burton was most hammered woman. Jim Burton was opulently and overtly optimistic. Ronnie Ash had the most times down the falls upright. Bob Taylor was the most calm. Eric Vanderbeck had the most missed serves. James Hobbs was a miracle man. Ted Drake had the most smiles. John Simmons had the best serve. Charles Smith had the most fun. I think I was the most bizarre. And Nolan Weitzel was the most motivated. So, and I've probably sent you some copies of all my
Things that I will miss about Charles. The way he likes his sandwiches made with pickles and extra mayonnaise.
Hey, Laura, a little louder, please.
The extraordinary green river truck that goes right over the river muck. Can you hear it? Yeah. His amazing patience with frustrating students that some assistants have tried to exterminate. His irreplaceable river salute he calls a rotator cuff stretch. Remember that?
Yeah.
The way I miss all my daughter's school functions. That was Katie's part. The unique trashed out look all his crap has. The astonishing way sweat just pours from his head. That tantalizing smell he has when he gets off the river. The way he lures unsuspecting students into side surfing holes. The black spattered bananas he makes his assistants eat. And the cute way his mouth puckers up when he has preparation H on it. And the one thing that I will not miss is Monty.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, before I say what I think I'm going to say, thank you for that. Some of you newbies, we had a trip where I was so stressed out. Brother Charles, I was scared to death. Because he went down his list of the paddles, the helmets, the whole deal. Well, I thought I had it all, because I always do. But this one time on the quad, I didn't have my helmet, and they already took off for the shuttle. So I find this old, I'm walking around the grounds at Guadalupe where they sometimes rent canoes and that sort of thing. Well, I thought that maybe they might rent some helmets. So I went up and knocked on the door and asked the guy, hey, do you rent helmets? No. He said, well, if you look around the grounds, you might find an old hard hat that has had some construction. You can take it and use it for the day. So I did. I found one and it had the name Haas on it. So I was Haas for the day. But I was so scared because Charles was coming back. I'm like, my God, he's going to see that I don't know. So, lo and behold, I forget who it was. I think it was Laurie said, Beta, did you see Charles? you know what? He's going to yell at me. I'm so scared. So I see Charles. So anyway, so this is what I wanted to say. The assistant instructors and some of the old school students commissioned a little project for Weldon. He took a beautiful photograph. It was a timed exposure 4x5 camera shot, and he took it on the Saline in the fall, and it sort of is symbolic of all of the students. I don't know how many students he's taken on the more than we can count. And it was the river that it was a lot of our very first time in a canoe, not to mention our first time surfing a rapid. So this is taken on the Big Hole, and I just hope that this serves as a remembrance for you, Charles, because this river has changed a lot of people's lives. I know it's changed my life, and so we just thought it was symbolic of that.
Wow. Kind of reminds me of all the times I was so scared my hands were shaking.
And thank you, Weldon.
Well done, well done. Well done, well done.
Better come in and join. I've known Charles probably a lot longer than most of you have. Actually, I was teaching at the South Campus of Tarrant County Junior College the year that Charles came to work for Tarrant County Junior College. And at the time, their campus wasn't ready. And so they spent a semester over on the South Campus. That's when I first met Charles. And I guess what I discovered is that actually probably we were very lucky because I think two really great things were brought to us from Arkansas. Charles, of course, came from Arkansas, and then, of course, the toothbrush wasn't invented in Arkansas. and the reason that we know that happened because if it had been invented in any other state, it would be called the teeth brush. I don't know if you realize that I mean, he's retiring from this particular job, but he's got himself covered. I understand that he just got hired to become a greeter at Walmart. And we'll probably see him, and if he works real hard, he may even get up to one of those superstores. Now, a lot of your stories have to do with canoeing. Of course, since I had known Charles before, I know some things that happened before this canoeing stuff started. And one of the first things that I remember from Charles is at the time he was teaching with us there on the South Campus, we decided we were going to have an intramural swim meet, but we felt since we had these visitors from the Northeast Campus, we ought to invite them to take part in the intramural swim meet with us. And so we told their instructors that if they had any students that would like to enter the swim meet to join in with us. And so Charles, of course, he was young. He just out of college. He was gung-ho. You know how you are when you first get a job. You want to really jump in there and do your best. So he hustled up one swimmer. That was the only swimmer they had. And so he, of course, quizzed her and tried to find out what strokes she had, and she really didn't know how to swim very well. After analyzing her swimming ability, Charles decided that she'd probably be a good breaststroker. Started working with her. And I mean, he trained her and you got to admire the amount of time. Once again, he was young. I mean, he was just getting started. He was professional, trying to impress us. And so he trained this girl for a couple of weeks and came to the meet and had the 100-yard, back then it was a 100-yard breaststroke. And the girl came in last. But I happened to walk by as she was getting out of the pool, and she said, she looked at him and said, "Coach," she said, "I don't want you to think that I'm a bad loser or anything, but I think those other girls were cheating. They were using their arms." Another thing you got gotta be a little careful about all this praise you're putting on the guy. I mean, all these accolades and all this stuff. I think it's going through his head. A couple weeks ago, he crawled into bed, and his wife said, "God, your feet are cold." And he looked at her and said, "Jimmy Sue, when we're in the bedroom like this, you can call me Charles." Another thing you guys know about Charles, I'm sharing all this stuff. This isn't paddle stuff, I know. This is important stuff to know. That he's really kind of into this technology stuff, and you probably didn't realize it, but if you've ever been in that truck, he's got some high-tech technology stuff. And one of the things he's got in there is a special telephone. And I was in his truck one day, and I was looking and said, "Hey, Charles, what is that thing?" He said, "Oh, that's my special telephone." And I said, "Gosh, that's cool. How does it work?" He said, "Well, you don't have to dial the number. You just call out a name or a word, and it telephones the person that it's signed up to call." I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Show me how that works, though." He said, "Hey, hon," and the phone rang, and his wife picked up the phone, and said, "Man, that's cool." And he said, "Hey, Chris," and the phone rang, and his son picked up the phone. And we happened to be out driving by then, and just then this other driver cut him off, just cut him right off. And Charles yelled out to him, "You big jerk!" The phone rang, Ronnie Ash. Manny Porkowitz, some of you don't know Manny, but some of you do. Manny said he wanted me to tell you that he wanted to come down tonight for this surprise party, but he just couldn't work it in. Actually, on the last Saturday of every month, he goes to his hairstylist. And the other thing he always sorts his socks. But Manny did share with me another story about Charles, and this was a duck hunting. I don't know if you knew it, Charles likes to duck hunt. And he had invited Charles out duck hunting, and they got out and they're duck blind, and Manny got all upset. He'd forgotten his duck call. And Charles says, "Hey, that's no problem." He said, "Up in Arkansas, we call ducks without one of those duck calls." And Manny said, "Well, yeah." He said, "How do you do that?" Well, Charles said, "Well, let me show you." He said, "You take your fingers like this, and you put them like that, and then you cup your hand just a certain way. You put your little finger up on your nose and turn your head. And go, 'Here, duck, here, duck.'" My time is up, right? One more story. This is what Charles had a dog. His dog died. He thought it died. He took it to the vet, and the vet took it in and laid this dog down on the examining table, and the vet says, "Hey, your dog's dead." Charles said, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" The vet, took his temperature, heart rate, and all that stuff. "I'm sorry, your dog is dead." And Charles said, "Well, isn't there another test that we could do on this dog to make sure that the dog's got a little life left in him, so I can take him home?" And the vet said, "Well, there's one other test we can do, and we'll do it if you want me to do it." Charles said, "Oh, please do it." So he opened the door, and his cat came in. The cat jumped up on the table. And of course, went up and smelled the dog's nose, and went around and smelled the dog's tail, and all that. He jumped down off the tail, and the dog was dead. And so the vet says, "Well," he said, "the dog's dead. That's what we tell you." And so Charles said, "Oh, okay." So he left. He was pretty sad. Went out to the waiting area out there to the receptionist, and the receptionist gave him the bill. It was $150. And Charles looked at that bill, and he said, "Man, it's $150? Why in the world did it cost $150? And the receptionist said, "Well," he said, "it's $50 for the visit, and it's $100 for the CAT scan." No, I'll tell you what. I do want to say this, that I have paddled with Charles. I've gone on some of his trips, and they've always been fantastic trips. I've always admired. I actually do a similar job over at Eastville College, and probably if anybody here really understands what it takes to do what he does, it's myself, because I have done it many, many times myself. And there's no better person that I know of that does this than Charles Smith. And I don't know of any better canoeing instructor in this country than Charles Smith. I think you could go out east to the Nantahala Center or wherever you want to go, and you're not going to find a person that will give you as good of instruction as you're getting right here from Charles Smith. And every time I've ever gone with him, or every time I've ever watched his class, I have learned something. You know, I think that as a teacher, there's a saying that those who teach must never cease to learn. And I really have tried to apply that to myself. And every time I'm with Charles, or actually I've observed his classes several times, I have learned things from him that I've been able to take and share with my students. And so as a result, you know, you think of all the number of people that Charles has helped. Well, there's many, many more out there that have been helped by people like me that have learned things from Charles, and we've been able to carry it over and utilize it in our own programs. And I think that is something that is unmatched by anybody that I know. And so I have appreciated all of you.
Is there anyone else who has something impromptu that they want to come up and say about Charles? Now is your chance. You know.
Yeah, I would just like to say that Charles, many of us spent many Sundays with you in church, kneeling in the Church of Mother Earth, and we've had a little baptism, submersion baptism, I think, sometimes on Sundays. And thank you for the great spirit that you've shown and shared with all of us.
Anyone else? Okay, I didn't save the best for last, I saved the meanest for last.
It's only appropriate.
Because I knew you'd be all teary-eyed and crying, and I thought I'd better put an end to that. So, I'm here to dispel some common myths about Charles Smith. And the first myth that I'm here to dispel is that Charles is nice. Charles is not nice. The assistant instructors are nice. If you haven't felt the full wrath of his meanness, it's just because it either gets blockaded or diluted by that numerous group of assistant instructors that come along on every trip. Why do you think he has so many of us? It's not to teach you, it's to dilute his meanness. So I have a couple of stories because I know the newbies aren't believing me. And I was here before there really were very many assistant instructors. So after one semester of the canoeing class, I went out to North Carolina. And at the time, we had these horrible anti-turn tandem boats. They wouldn't spin for anything. And I'd been in the class one semester. I was in a tandem boat on those rivers out east. And there was another student that had the class one semester, and we were in the tandem boat together. And we were on the Hiawassee River, and we were running a rapid called Stair Step Rapid, and it was low water. And so you can imagine, one semester there had been no assistants to help teach us, and we were landing on every stupid rock in that river. And we get stuck and we get ourselves off, and we go about 3 feet and we get stuck again and we get ourselves off. And so we hit about the 5th rock, and we're stuck on it pretty good, and we're sitting there trying to figure out how we're going to get off this rock. And all of a sudden, here comes Charles from across the river. Ferries over to us, and I'm thinking, oh good, Charles is going to help us get off this rock. Charles paddles up to the boat, looks me straight in the eye, and this is the truth. And you said the reason, Diana, that you're having so much trouble on this river is because you're not reading the water very well. Spun around and went back across.
That's
me. And then I have been the victim of Charles's wrath. One year we were on we were going to, what river was it? South Fork of the Cumberland. We were driving to go to the South Fork of the Cumberland, and Charles and I were in the truck together, and we had a caravan going, and Charles says, Diana, you drive, I need to take a nap, but wake me up when we get to this certain town. Okay, Charles. But, you know, it means that I am not some backwoods hillbilly from Arkansas. When you say the word town to me, that means that there are buildings involved. So I drive, and at some point, we stopped at a stoplight and went one road, crossed over another, but that was the extent of it. And I just kept driving, and about an hour later, Charles wakes up and he says, Diana. He looks at the time and he looks at me and he says, have we passed such and such a town? I said, well, Charles, you told me to wake you up. I don't think we've passed this town. And he immediately gets on the radio to Curtis. Now, this was way before Curtis and I are dating, which was fortunate for Curtis because we would have been broken up after this. But he radios back to Curtis and he says, Curtis, have we passed such and such a town? And Curtis says, oh, yeah, we passed that a long time ago, Charles. And I'm like, oh. So Charles looks at me and I go, well, I don't think I've passed the pudding yet, Charles. I think we're okay. Don't you think? I don't know, Diana. You didn't wake me up. And then for the next 30 minutes, all I heard from the passenger seat of the car was this. Good Lord, the man has turned into a grizzly bear, and I'm going to have to think of a way to leap out of a moving vehicle and pass this pudding. And fortunately for me, we hadn't, and so Charles got over it, but there was some meanness there.
That's mean. He's so mean.
And the second myth that I have is that Charles is safe. Charles is not safe. I bet I could count on one hand the number of you that have actually been rescued by Charles. Sure, Ronnie throws you a rope, Curtis throws you a rope. Maybe if the camera's rolling, Charles might go chase after somebody. But for the most part, he's not doing rescues. And you can't be safe. Anybody that makes someone swim in a class 4 rapid before they will throw them a rope who says, what's the magic word? And then demands to get pretty please as an answer is not safe. The third myth is that Charles has good judgment. Charles does not have good judgment. And I have a nice little illustration of this. One year we were on the Chattooga. Class section 4, we were running the falls. We had 2 frisky young C1 boaters on the trip, and they both had rolls, and they were really good boaters. And they had run all the falls, Charles and the 2 C1s. The rest of us had the good sense to portage everything, except for Charles and the C1 boaters, and they ran all the falls. And it got to the last falls, and it's a class 5 rapid. And the boys wanted to run that class 5 rapid. And so by that time, I had been around long enough to recognize when stupid thoughts were running through Charles's head. And I could tell, the boys were asking him, and I could tell Charles was thinking about, letting them run the falls. So at some point, Charles and I end up over on the side, and I'm telling Charles, you can't let those boys run that rapid. It's a class 5 rapid. Because, I've already told you he's not safe, and I knew who he's going to throw out there to rescue him should something go wrong. So that wasn't going to happen. So I said, Charles, you can't let them run this rapid. It's not safe. They can't run this rapid. Oh, Diana, they won't ever get to do this again. This will be their last chance to be out here. I said, Charles, this is an ACA clinic. You cannot run a class 5 rapid in an ACA clinic. You can't let those boys do that. Well, Diana, they've both got good rolls. They're good boaters. They should be okay. I said, Charles, now I'm getting desperate at this time. I said, Charles, if you let those boys run that rapid, I am going to tell on you. And he turns around, because that gets his attention. He turns around, he goes, well, who are you going to tell, Diana? I said, well, I'm going to start with the ACA, and I'm going to finish with Jimmy Sue. And Charles said, boys, Diana's not letting me run you. And the last myth that I have about Charles is that Charles is a good teacher. And all I'm going to say about that is if Charles were such a good teacher, all you people wouldn't have to take this class so many times. But seriously, I think, I speak for a lot of people when I say that Charles has taught us more than just canoeing strokes and how to get down the river. Ooh, I'm getting pumped. Charles has taught us.
You want a drink?
I need your sunglasses. Charles has taught us all, a lot about life and a lot about values and things like that during the years. And so we really appreciate all the effort, time, and mental and physical and emotional energy that you put into the class.
I love you, man.
It's your turn.
I don't sit very well. I teach better than I sit.
That's a matter of fact.
All right. I went back and did a little bit of research. And this is what I came up with. The first canoe trip I ever went on, the first time I was ever in a canoe, was on the Brazos River. And the South Campus, Mike, had rented boats from Bob Naramore, author of the Texas Rivers and Rapids. We showed up right below the Whitney Dam and started down the river. Well, I fashioned myself quite a fisherman. I've always fished my whole life, and I'd always wanted something to fish out of, and what TCC paid me my first year, $7,000, my first year of full-time teaching in college, wasn't going to buy a bass boat. So as soon as I got in that canoe, I said, this is it. That's what I need. This is magical. I can get over there and I can throw my plug over there. Well, Bob Naramore had these little spinner baits called H&H spinners. I don't know if any of you have ever used them. But coming from Arkansas, I didn't quite understand the concept. They came in a little cellophane package, and they had not a treble hook, but there were two hooks, and you kind of had to hook it through an eye in there, and you had to thread it on, the two hooks. Well, I didn't know all that, so for about the first 4 hours, Great White Fisherman was throwing a hookless lure, and I was getting hits, and I wasn't catching anything. And I said, hey, boy, and I was throwing it right in their mouth, and I couldn't catch a thing, and finally, about halfway through the day, I pulled up my lure, and Eva Harrell, who was another teacher at that time, said, "Well, you big dummy, you hadn't even got a hook on there." And so then I put the hook on there and I started catching them. But that was our very first canoe trip, and Mike was there on that canoe trip, I guess, weren't you? And so I'll never forget the thought that I had, I've got to have a canoe. Well, me and 3 other friends drove to Arkadelphia, Arkansas the next weekend. We bought 3 canoes. Right then, we bought 3 Ouachita aluminum canoes, and that was my first canoe that I ever had. Used it for years and years and years. I canoe fished and camped for recreation. My kids and my wife and my family, my father-in-law, brother-in-law, and his kids. We used those things for recreation for years and years and years. My first active role in instruction was assisting Eva Harrell, who's retired quite some time ago, with a canoe segment. We started a class called an outdoor education class, and she taught half a semester of rock climbing and rappelling, and then a half a semester of canoe camping was really what it was. But since I had been canoeing, I went along to kind of help her out. I had a little bit more experience than she did, and really hadn't thought much about teaching the canoeing, but after that, kind of helping her, we decided that there was way too much for her to teach with both those segments. I mean, those are 2 diverse subject matters, and so we split the class then into a climbing and rappelling class, and then the canoe camping class. So that's when it first started. 1976 was the first year that I taught a canoe class, and it was called Canoe Camping. I took the first canoe trip with a class to the Brazos River below Whitney. Then we went to the Colorado River from Bend, Texas, down to what's the state park? Colorado Bend State Park. I couldn't think of where the little waterfalls come in down there. And then the 3rd trip was to the Buffalo River in Arkansas. And that was kind of a standard. That was the 3 trips for several years of canoe camping. And the emphasis was, gear and waterproofing your stuff and stoves and sleeping bags and stuff like that. And it stayed like that for quite a while. I was at a meeting, a physical education meeting in Atlanta, and met a guy there at an outdoor education seminar whose name was Bob Benner. And he was a teacher in a community college in North Carolina. Bob Benner is the author of North Carolina rivers and streams paddling book. And so we talked a lot, found that we had a lot in common. So I took my first canoe class with Bob Benner, went back east for a week-long paddling adventure, trip, clinic with him, taught at Camp Mondayman, which is a boys' camp. There's a Green Cove, which is the girls' camp, and that was, remember the announcement I made at the beginning of the semester, one of my students is teaching there now. Gone full circle with all that, but we stayed in the little boys' dormitory there, and we paddled all week long, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. We went to the Tuckasegee River, which I thought, oh my God, biggest water I've ever seen in my life. Well, it's not a lot different than some of these rapids here. We went over to a section on the French Broad. Had an awful day over there. We just had a terrible time. But we kept practicing, and at the end of the week, we ran 2 straight days on the Nantahala River, and boy, was I hooked. I just thought, well, this is the best thing that has ever happened. This is just my deal. I like this. So I started really working at it then in 1977, and I started beyond just the fishing, doing more paddling, more whitewater stuff. I started teaching, best I could find, the first class that I taught with a whitewater emphasis was in 1978. And I remember Tripp. Some of you know Tripp, John McGuffin. Tripp was there, and Rusty Williams was there. They were in that class. And we were doing C-turns, 80 turns, heel outs on the Colorado River at piddling water levels about like this.
In tandem. Tandem boats, right?
Aluminum.
Yeah.
Aluminum tandem boats, no tie straps. That's what this clinic was too, by the way. Back then, if you had flotation, it was a inner tube, or it was a piece of styrofoam stuffed down in there. But still, the highlight of those days was it was a lot more camping type stuff. We took our gear down the river with us, and on that particular trip was in spring, and it was the time of the year that the sand bass run up the river from Lake Buchanan. And so we stopped at a sandbar, and Tripp and Rusty and I sat there and caught one sand bass right after another. I had a hook on them. And we were just snatching them out, and we had a fish fry for 30 people on the sandbar that night. One of the most memorable experiences we ever had, and everybody that ever took that class always remembers the fish fry on the sandbar. But that was the first whitewater emphasis I ever remember doing anything with, trying to teach eddy turns and peel outs, 1978. 1980, I led my first trip back east, and it was a group of 2 other faculty members, Eva Harrell, Joy Thetford, who took my place when I retired. She's the department chairperson there now. Rusty Williams, Tripp McGuffin, and a young lady named Pam, who was in the class that semester. That was the group on that trip. We met a friend there named Glenn Fortenberry, a cousin actually of Rusty's, and that's developed a lifelong friendship. He and I are kind of kindred spirits. Those of you that don't know me very well may not know that I'm a very much a practical joker. Would that be accurate? And we pulled quite a lot of stunts together, he and I. He's just about as crazy as I am about that kind of stuff. I kind of watch it around the class, but if you're around me very much, you kind of have to watch your backside because I'm always up to something. But the big adventure was we were going to go, in addition to the rivers I had done before, they had just, in a few years before that, opened up paddling on the Ocoee River. The Ocoee River had been dry for years and years and years, but due to the efforts of some whitewater paddlers in that area, they started rafting adventures on there, and a lot of private boaters were starting to use it, and so I had heard that it was a pretty good place to paddle. So that was our first trip. So I prepared myself for that, knowing that I was going to solo that. I learned out east that if you weren't a solo canoeist, you were nobody. If you were a solo canoeist back then, you were the elite of the paddling crew because there weren't that many paddlers. And so I trained myself long and hard for that. I paddled one day in a solo boat on Piney Creek in Arkansas. And so I declared myself an expert. I had a big old tandem canoe that I had, if you can visualize this, bow going that way. I turned it around, going the other way, and sat on the stern seat, which put me closer to the center of the boat. I had an inner tube stuffed up in there. I had a big old styrofoam block in there in the center of the boat. And somewhere that day, I had found a kayak flotation bag floating in an eddy. And so I stuffed that in the stern. And I'll never forget, we put in, successfully ran entrance wrap all the way from the top, got down to Gonzo Shoals. Now, I'm sitting on the stern seat, no thigh straps, and the styrofoam block is right in front of me, pushed up against me like this, and it dawned on me, I can't get out of here if I turn over. So I got out and was standing up on top of a rock, and I was chopping out knee holes in this styrofoam. So I had this bright idea, I'll create knee cups for myself. Pretty good idea. I wish I had marketed that, because some people did that later. But I had to chop out myself little knee cups. I ran the whole river that first day, never turned over one time. Now, how many of you have heard me say that God smiles on the foolish, the ignorant, and the drunk? And he kind of takes care of them. But once you have a little information, he expects you to do your part and have a little common sense. Well, the next day, it was just disaster. I mean, I was all over the river. I went through Broken Nose. Inner tube went that way. Styrofoam block went that way. And I'm spinning around in the center of this boat, not knowing which way to go. And the rest of the day pretty much went just about like that. It was horrible. I kept on paddling the next 4 or 5 years, you know, running more and more serious stuff. 1984, I went to my first ACA certification activity, got my whitewater certification, and that's when I really started, you know, really teaching more whitewater type stuff. Well, now here comes the part of this chronology here that brings in the people that are helping me. Spring of 1985, a little old skinny girl showed up in the canoeing class. Her name was Diana McCowan. Immediately was determined to be somebody that could really, really handle ribbing. And so started in on her almost immediately. She was a real good mark. I mean, she's just set herself up easily to take it. Her first day of paddling, she paddled with a young lady named Linda Hertberg. Where are you, Diana?
I'm over here.
You remember?
Mm-hmm.
First day, I looked, this is all in these 2 journals here. A lot of stuff in there, a lot of information in those. 1986, fall semester was the first time to teach the canoeing class both fall and spring semester. Up until that time, I taught it only in the spring semester. So fall and spring, 1986. Now in 1986, Buzz Gardner, who some of you here know, teaches at TCC, Daryl's in his scuba class right now. Buzz went along to help out. He and Diana paddled together, and Diana and Buzz paddled a brand new Mohawk canoe that had never been in the water before on the lower Guadalupe right below Green Bridge. That was a long, that was a real precursor of things to come, because I've been bailing her butt out ever since. Yeah, 1986 was the last class trip my wife went on with me prior to this one. And our daughter Lisa, who was 12 or 13 at the time, went with us. That was the tornado trip that I told some of you about last night, I guess. 1987 was the first semester my son Chris took the class. That was all at about the same time that George and Ted and John, Bob Taylor were all showing up about that same time. Not Ted and John, but George and Bob. Excuse me. 1987, spring semester. Just prior to the semester starting, I was going down the stairs in the racquetball court, and I met head-on with this great big old smile with hair all over it. And that was Ronnie. He met me and said, hey, how are you doing? I said, my name's Ronnie Ash. I'm in your canoeing class this semester. And he missed it. I think we were going to take it the semester before, and it was full or something. Got in late registration, couldn't take it, so it delayed him a semester. But that started a long relationship. Ronnie became just an immediate part of my canoeing family, and really my true family as well. Okay, where's the water?
It's over there.
Let's see. Spring semester, first semester with Ronnie. March the 6th, he paddled with a young lady named Melinda, who he secretly admired. Which has subsequently repeated itself. Some of you young ladies probably have no idea of the lust that he had in his heart over the years for some of you. We paddled on Denton Creek. Denton Creek, above the lake, we found a abandoned pickup truck that had been run off of a bridge that was no longer there, had license plates on it, and we called it in. It had just been stolen the night before. It had been stripped and pushed off in Denton Creek, and we eddy turned behind it. We used it for sea turn. The best eddy we had was eddy turn behind the pickup truck. Now, please don't think me rude, but let me tell you another quick story about an eddy turn with my brother-in-law on the Buffalo River. We were paddling at very, very low water level. My brother-in-law didn't know much about paddling. He loved to fish, but I was kind of explaining about eddy turns. We got down to where the state park was, and there were a lot of people there on a very shallow shoal of water, not much water running through. And again, forgive my distastefulness here, but there was a rather large lady, big lady, sitting in the water, all the way squatting down. And I thought, well, that's the best eddy I've seen all day. So, you're right. Right in the eddy we went. She was sitting there cross-legged. The bow came up right here. She stood up, our eddy washed out, and away we went. Fall of '87 was Curtis' first class. Little did we know that he, along with at least 12 other people that I know of, maybe we forgot others, have either been in a long-term relationship or gotten married as a result of the class. There have also been a number of people who started dating and maybe broke up. And we ruined one marriage right down there. One marriage was completely ruined. This couple was engaged. Remember their names, Ronnie?
Charlie was the guy.
Charlie was the guy's name. Low water, so being creative, we had a little timed drill. Eddy turn, peel out, ferry over here, eddy turn here, going for time. Now, so far, everything had gone really well with Charlie. And you know my rule. You don't paddle together. But Charlie and she said, please, can we paddle together? I want to run it with her. I said, against my better judgment, I said, okay. Well, they got in this pool up here, off they went, they hit that eddy turn, flipped smooth over, and Charlie had this side to him that was, aggressive and dynamic, and he came up, yelled at her, was mad at her, screaming at her. I mean, just went off on her. She got to the eddy and she said to me, don't you ever let me paddle with him again. And she said right there, if I had a gun, I would shoot him right now. she went right over and told him the marriage is off, and it was over with, and it happened right down there. So I've ruined one marriage I know of. I have one student who has been married to 2 different students from this class, and another man who has been married from 2 students from this class. So I've got 2 men who have married 2 women, both of them from this class, divorced, married, divorced, married. Now there's another divorce. Well, there's another story behind all of that. But anyway, Curtis' first semester. Do you know who you paddled with the very first day you paddled, Curtis?
Back here.
I'm back here. I would have been in the same class as Ronnie.
Do you know who you paddled with the first day? You paddled with me. You're very...
No.
It's on the book. It's in the book. At least
I had turned behind the truck with Ronnie.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I was on that. There's a girl. I don't know who.
It was the next trip after that. I didn't look at the Denton Creek
trip. The second trip, the first day was with you.
Okay.
Yes.
That was what I thought was your first day paddling. You were on that trip.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't look that up. Okay.
That's the day you almost knocked yourself out when your paddle hit the rock and hit you in the face.
Yeah. That's where I learned both hands go out over the gum. Fall '87, first class, paddled with me on the Guadalupe. Ronnie paddled a C1, a vintage character. He had this little bilge pump. He was constantly turning over and wet exiting because he didn't have a roll, and he had this little bilge pump. He was just going. Water's shooting out of this thing and I'm not sure whether all that was water or whether Ronnie was just taking potty breaks in there. But at any rate, he was constantly turning over the same way. Do you remember? Yeah. He would do a cross forward, and as he'd bring it back up, it'd jam, and over he would go. And so that's where I, really emphasized learning to feather it out the side, because, he was over more than he was up. On that trip, who was there? Anybody remember other than those? Anybody there on that trip other than those 2?
George
George
was there. Sandy would have been there.
Sandy would have been there. I found my cat Blue on that trip. Y'all remember my cat I found?
Yeah.
There was this little kitten who was hanging around the campground, cute little kitten. He would eat from the table. We were there all 3 nights, and I said, if that cat's still there when we come back, I'm going to take him home. And we got back and to do the shuttle. My truck was sitting there, and there the cat was on the hood. So I said, well, okay, meant to be. So Blue came and walked in our bed many nights, pushing his feet. Spring of 1988, I had talked to a young lady who'd been in my conditioning class into taking the class. Thought that it'd be something she'd enjoy, and that was Laura's first semester. Laura paddled with me her first day on Big Piney Creek. That was her first trip, Big Piney Creek. Let's see. Who's next? Fall of '88. Monty showed up with this stupid little Allison-looking tent. You know what I'm talking about? How many of you know last week?
Got wet.
And it never rained a lick because I thought he was the kiss of death. We had a drought for about 3 years. We paddled here on the San Marcos. I didn't go back and look at the class rolls. I only wrote the first names down. I can't remember who he was, but you paddled with someone named David the first day.
He never came back.
Yeah, I can understand why.
Even scaring them away back then, Monty.
It was 160 cubic feet per second that day, so pretty low. We were building eddies.
Yep.
1989, the spring of 1989, 2 guys that I could never get their names straight.
He never has.
If I say John, both of them look. If I say Ted, both of them look. And what made it more difficult was their first day, they paddled together. They were partners their very first day on, and they came as friends to the class. John and Ted, having come over from the South Campus, already been working, I think, with Paul at that time. Paul Stewart on the South Campus class, and came over to work on their skills a little bit so they could be better assistants over there. And for years, graciously helped both the South and the Northeast campus. 1990, here's the baby. Alan showed up. Alan's first semester, you paddled with a young man named Rick on the Saline. Remember?
Oh yeah, we swam a lot.
Yeah. Now, there are a lot of other people who helped me other than these 8. Safety boaters in the early years prior to the 8 who've now helped me for so long faithfully over the last several years. And many of you won't know some of these names, some of you will. Eva Harrell, who I mentioned earlier, teacher who retired, went with me on several trips. Joy Thetford, the department chairperson, went with me on several trips. But early on, they weren't really teaching assistants as such. They were just guys going along to help out, guys and gals going along to help out, that were more safety boaters. Back then, it was kind of the typical thing. They'd go to college, spend a couple of years, go to another school and leave. But I found a group of people who weren't doing that, and Ronnie, who was going to make himself a career junior college student, and who was going to hang around, and these older guys and a couple of young puppies who didn't seem to be going anywhere with their lives. I'd stay there a while. Others who've helped me are Trip McGuffin, a good friend of mine. We hunt together, fish together a lot. He's a duck hunting friend and fishing friend. Holland Holmes. Holland was a cartoonist, was a beautiful artist, and a kayaker. William Barrett. William Barrett went on to use the skills in the class and whitewater rafting guided in Colorado, and is now a ski instructor and ski slope medic EMT guy up in Colorado. Lisa Whitney, who also was in that same group, river guided and rafted for years, is now a teacher in Colorado. Wes Moffitt, who among that whole group went up and river guided and now works for ski slopes in Colorado. Linda Enoch Berger, who now is an ACA certified instructor and teaches out of Four Corners in Colorado, was in that group. So you can see a lot of people have gone on and used that. As a matter of fact, I'm ever grateful that she got there, because that's how Matt and Jennifer made contact with this class. Was they went up and took the class with Linda, and that's how they found about the program here. Billy McCallan, who worked at TCC for years, helped me on a number of trips while she was at TCC before she retired. Scott Luttrell, who met his wife Yvette in this class, helped me for years. But all of them kind of grew up and went on, but these 8 have held out with me a long time.
Been circling in this city for years.
Yeah. Special thanks, not instructor types, but 2 guys who've helped me a lot with logistics, particularly on the back east trips. Bob Taylor, George Wilhelm, good friends, good companions. Okay, now, I'd like to get all the assistant instructors to come up here and stand for just a moment. I have something I'd like to give you. All the assistant instructors coming up. First of all, this, unfortunately, is what's left of the Assistant Instructor Retirement Fund. I want to give credit to Diane, because Diane probably made the largest contribution that was ever made to the Assistant Instructor Fund. Just short of 30 cents, as I recall, is whatever she had in her pocket, but she made a contribution one night. Now, Diana tried to parlay that into a larger sum of money in Las Vegas. And unfortunately, all that's left is 27 cents. So, each of you get 3 cents.
All right.
It's a low return rate when you're playing the quarter slots with 50 cents.
All right. Just don't spend it all in one place.
There's your 3.
All right.
You're dating yourself.
That's right.
You've dated
Date
yourself.
stamps.
The price of bubble gum. No, they're waiting a long time for that.
Yeah.
We've been
20 some odd years.
Now, if you've never noticed it, the assistant instructor retirement home is on Interstate 30. If you're going toward Texarkana, toward New Boston, look at the big mansion on the left just before you get into Mount Pleasant. That's the assistant instructor retirement home. They each have fully paid room and board for the rest of their lives. Now, there are 3 cents left, and we're going to donate that to the Texas River Protection Fund. Okay. I have a certificate here that goes to each one of them. It says Tarrant County College Northeast Campus, Certificate of Appreciation, the name to follow. It says, thank you for your years of dedicated service to the canoeing program offered through the Health and Physical Education Department. Your assistance has helped develop one of the best instructional programs available in the United States. Countless students have benefited from your instructional skills by becoming technically proficient paddlers in a safe and fun environment. Had to get those in there. Thanks to you, many students have developed skills they can use for a lifetime. And the first one goes to Ronnie Ash.
Could you have found a cheaper frame?
I want to mention that this was not the one that I picked out. The one that I picked out was $18, and the department did not do it. Since I was the department chairman, I didn't have anything else to say about it. Curtis Berner. Curtis, thank you. Diana Berner. And Ray. John Simmons.
You get it mixed up with Oh, wait, this says John.
Monty Bill. And Alan Tutt. And I've got one other thing for you guys.
Is it a green t-shirt?
This is Diana's.
It's probably a
You go ahead and open it if you want to. Monty
For 3 cents.
Alan,
Your campground fee.
Ted,
Here, John.
John Simmons, and Ronnie Ash. I've got a note in there to each one of them, and there's a Walmart gift card for $100 in there for you.
Mine says something about I got to pay a nuisance fee for Miami.
So again, each one of them, you read your own note, but I just can't tell you guys how much I've appreciated their help all these years, and you cannot imagine the amount of torture that they have gone through to work with people just like you. I mean, they have worn their bodies out trying to get you to places that you're not helping them get to. And to repeat 1,000 times the same stroke with patience over and over and over. And I cannot tell you the appreciation I have for your loyalty. It's been beyond comprehension, the help that you've given me, and the faithfulness and the friendship and the love has been wonderful.
We have a little button for Charles so that we can all find him in the dark. If you'll give me 2 minutes to finish decorating this cake, Laura's going to help me. We'll have cake, and you can have a potty break and come back. We do have a video tonight that Alan has put together.
Thank you all very much. That's very nice. Mike and all the rest of you guys that had something to say. Great. Thank you.
What's that rain, David?
Somehow